I'm sure, as a stewardship that you've been given, because at the end of the day, elections are definitive in our system because they're trusted by the public, and when people lose faith in the outcome of elections, we're going to have some deeper problems that are much harder to solve.
And we know that you and other members of the county boards were frequently, the reason you were appointed to the county board is because you are connected to people within one political party or another. So we know that that's a reality, and that there may be continued conversations that go on with that political party. But that doesn't change the expectation of the public that their county board members are going to be acting in a fair and impartial way on any matter that comes before them. And so it really is, you're taking on this additional public trust when you take the position of a county board member, and our state board members have the same expectation of them. Those are people who, a lot of them were connected, and that's the reason that they were recommended to be appointed to the state board. But they have a very important public trust that's been put in their care. So this is a non-exhaustive list of county board authority. If you consult 163A-769, you'll see there's a big long list there, and some of those are not very helpful to go through, so that's why we didn't put up the whole slide, but you can certainly look at it there. There are also other duties throughout Chapter 163A. So that includes appointing precinct officials. They get appointed in odd-numbered years in August, so that will be happening this year. Determining the sufficiency of petitions. That could be petitions for unaffiliated candidates, petition in lieu of filing fee, things like that. Providing for the purchase of voting booths and ballot boxes. Publishing the required elections notices, or ensuring that your staff publishes the required elections notices. Canvassing the returns and issuing certificates of election. Hiring county board employees, preparing and submitting a budget to the county commissioners, and any other duties required by the state board or elsewhere in the chapter. So one-stop plans is an important duty of the county board's elections. Nominating a director in the event that there is a vacancy, or hiring a director in the event there's a vacancy. And that the elections director is something that the county board, they accept applications or do whatever their process is, and then they select the person that they would like to nominate, but the executive director is the final sign-off on that. And the General Assembly recently changed it so that the executive director can disapprove a nomination if there's good cause not to do so. So it used to be kind of like always the executive director shall approve unless there was some illegal reason, but now there's a little more flexibility in that.
So what you're saying is our recommendation for a director goes directly to the state executive director.
Correct, yes.
There's no county commission approval in there.
No, definitely not. The County Board of Elections makes the decision about who they want to hire.
Some of our county commissioners don't realize that.
Yeah, and it's tough for them a lot of times, and we get calls from county attorneys because they don't understand that relationship. Mm-hmm. And so they'll say, for instance, well, we have a policy that it has to be posted, and it has to be posted this way, and then here's who's on the committee. All of that, you can use that if you want. In fact, a lot of the counties do. They say, hey, you already have the system for posting stuff, let's use it. You already have the HR policies, let's use them. But ultimately, it is your responsibility, and it's up to you how you want to do that.
Yeah, and there's it's in our chapter about the process for the county board making the nomination and the executive director making the ultimate selection. So, if there are questions about that, we can, certainly send them a link to what the law is to make sure that they understand it. But it is a best practice that you post it and do a competitive hiring process. It's the way you're most likely to get qualified candidates.
That is for director. I mean, it's not just for staff in the office, right? That doesn't have to go to the state executive director.
No. So the County Board of Elections has staffing authority, and I think we get into this later, that some counties delegate that to their director, kind of depending on the size, because there are some really large county boards of elections. But that's not something that goes up to the state. It's done on a county level.
That's right. And the county director, the reason that goes up to the executive director is because y'all can't just get rid of your executive or your director down here unless the executive director agrees and signs off on it too, or the state board agrees and signs off on it. And in the same way, even if y'all love your director, our executive director could initiate a process in front of the state board and remove your director. So it's a hybrid hire. It's paid for by the county. I don't know why the statute set it up this way. It's paid for by the county. They really answer to you. But there's this safeguard built in that they don't have to freak out if they're getting on the bad side of one or two board members because they're following the law. If they're following the law, they know that the backstop is the state board is going to back them up, and they're not going to be able to get fired even if the board doesn't like them. Same way is even if y'all do like the person and they're not following the law, state board can get rid of them. And so it's only for the executive director that has to get that joint approval, but that's how that kind of works.
Yeah, so I already mentioned this about delegation. There are some duties that cannot be delegated. Those are things like quasi-judicial duties, so that would be candidate challenges, voter challenges, election protests, the things that you're getting together and having a hearing on where you're adjudicating somebody's rights. But there are other fundamental duties that can't be delegated, things like your canvass, your absentee meetings like you're having today, provisional decisions. Those are things that your staff can help prepare you for, but the ultimate decision has to be made by the County Board of Elections. That's what your job is, and that's why you've been appointed, to make those important decisions.
Yeah. All right, we're going to get into my kind of section of this, and I'll go.
Do you want me to?
Oh, no, I'm fine.
Yeah.
Quickly, if that helps. So the county board duties, and we're going to just focus on the administrative side, and we're going to talk a little bit about quasi-judicial and a couple other things. But in general, exactly what Caitlin said, there are two big buckets where you would fit what you do. One of them is administrative, and the other one is quasi-judicial. And almost everything you do is going to be administrative. And a couple times when things go bad, with like an election protest or a voter challenge, or some of the other things that we'll discuss, you'll get into quasi-judicial proceedings. And that's where you are much more of a judge rather than an administrator. And those proceedings look a lot more like court rather than let's get this done and let's count the ballots and let's try to make sure that the administration is done right. So the two big buckets are administrative duties and quasi-judicial duties. We're going to handle those buckets separately. But the distinction between them, as Caitlin said, is that quasi-judicial, where y'all are acting more like a court, you cannot delegate to staff. Or when it's something that's specifically set out in statute, like canvass, like doing absentee meetings, you can't just give that to Valeria and say, you run with it. There's a reason to say that the statutes say you have to do it, and when you guys do something together, it's always in an open meeting. So there's protections that are built in for the public just by assigning it to the board itself. So we'll get into administrative first. We'll cover staffing. I can get through these quickly because this is what we kind of just talked about. You nominate the elections director, and you can, if you want, use the county process to figure out who's out there. And to even have procedures in place for how you go through screening them. But you don't have to. And once you have gotten together in a meeting and appointed somebody, recommended somebody, it goes up to the state executive director, and we turn those around really fast. I mean, Director Strack, she looks at it, she looks at their resume, she makes sure that it meets kind of basic qualifications, and if she has concerns, she contacts the board. But we're never trying to hold up your process. But it does require that sign-off. The elections director should have a clear sense of what the board expects of him or her. And the way that you do that under the statutes is that you're supposed to enter into the official minutes the duties, responsibilities that are designated to your director. So if your director is expected to be here between the hours of 8 and 5 or whatever it is, you want to spell that out. And the statutes actually want you to make an official delegation of anything that you are taking that would normally be your job and giving to that person. So if it's receiving absentee ballots when people walk through the door, and that's an expectation that no board member is going to be here, right, during the whole absentee voting period to collect stuff, you want to try to document that. And it helps, one, ensure that those things are being done, but then two, it gives you something to fall back on to say, hey, are you not doing your job? It gives you a document that you get to point to, and if there's particular things you have questions about with that, we're happy to help you. There are some counties, obviously all the counties have something at some point that have looked like this, but we're happy to look through some of those and make sure that some of the key things are at least covered in some fashion. That doesn't mean you can't assign more. You can assign other things. You can assign whoever, right? Valeria, you could be like, Valeria, I need you to do X, Y, and Z on Tuesday. The board could assign that to her, even if it's not in the official delegation that happened earlier, but you do want to have that document. And you have to make a big decision that a lot of the counties have to figure out for themselves, is whether or not the director has the power to hire and fire people below the director. The power is yours as the board. Under the statutes, the county board of elections, and anytime it says that, it's you, it's not the office staff. You have the power. You can do whatever you would like to do. If you want to vet the resumes, do the interviews, and hire every person that gets hired in that office, that's up to you. But like Caitlin said, there are some big counties where they've delegated that down to the director. But you'll have to make that decision for yourself. And you can always unmake your decisions. You make them with a majority vote, you unmake them with a majority vote. You're not locked in once you do it. So you can keep active in seeing whether something's working out or not working out. On the funding side, and that's the next little section, the biggest thing that the county board can do is ensure that you're advocating for the amount of money that you need to securely run elections in your county. And that looks different in a lot of different counties. You know, here, you're using tabulators, you're not doing touchscreen stuff, right? In Mecklenburg, they're doing touchscreen stuff all the time. That's a whole different ballgame because it changes, if they have more precincts, that's a whole bunch more machines, like a lot more machines, because every voting station is a new machine. But it's not that way for y'all. If you were wanting to change precinct sizes or do anything that's going to affect the bottom line, the best thing that the board can do is be aware how your decisions are affecting the bottom line and then advocating to the county commissioners as to why that's important. And a lot of times they just need to be made to care, and I know that that's a contentious relationship. They're required to fund you at minimum levels. Under the statutes, they have to fund you to the amount necessary, and they use like the word necessary, to actually operate the elections. But sometimes county boards will get a little puffy and say, necessary is whatever I say it is, and then they get crossways with their county commissioners, and that's not a very constructive thing. I mean, there's been some lawsuits about it, things like that, but it never works out the way that the county boards want it to if they just go head to head. So we really encourage folks to try to make it work, letting them know that you're seeing a rise in absentee voting, and that ends up meaning that you need to send out more, and that's postage. Or there's going to be a new election, like the re-election for CD9, right? That's an additional cost that was not factored into your budget before. So staying in touch with your staff to see, okay, where are we at in the budget? Are we falling short? What was new? You know, that we didn't have funding allocated for last April when we went before them and we had no idea that we needed to ask for it, but now we do know that we need to ask for it going forward. But that's the biggest thing that you can do.
And you want to keep in communication with the county manager, and some county boards of elections have even done joint planning sessions with the county commissioners. So you would notice a meeting with the county commissioners noticing a meeting, and that would be a way, if it's helpful for you, depending on how the county is structured, that you can make sure that you're really communicating with your meetings.
That's right. And that can be new staff too, if you need extra staff or whatever, trying to make the case for it. We can help sometimes, and Kim has helped some counties make the case for why they need additional staffing. You know, whether that's a security issue or if that's just an administrative issue, or raising funds for more for the type of director that you need. We've tried to help where we can. Our help is limited to just advocacy, but it doesn't mean that they're going to buy it, but we can try. So let us know if there are real significant issues there. Additionally, we are working on a process where counties, if they're trying to up their security and need money to do that, that we are going to be able to try to work out some type of grant program, because there is some money that we have that could be used for upping security. So like we're pushing really hard right now, right, that the veteran stuff is severed from the board, and you know, if push came to shove, we would make that happen, whether that's by purchasing whatever's necessary to make that happen. But there's a need for it, and I know that our director is wanting to come up with a process that's easier. But if you need something on that end, security, let us know, because we can possibly make that work. This is a non-delegable function of the board, and that's provisional decision making. Did you have a talk already from Ronnie about provisionals? I think she's going to do that after, like just right in time for you to be able to make your decisions on provisionals. But I'll just give you a brief overview. She'll give you a much more technical version of this, but it's something you can't delegate to staff. Staff conducts research on provisional votes. They try to determine whether, when they go into scenes, which is our main election system, they can find out if this person really is registered. Maybe they were registered in a different precinct and they showed up at the wrong precinct and they voted provisionally. They put it in a provisional envelope They weren't on the poll books. And then the staff will come up with a recommendation about whether that ballot should be counted. But ultimately, it's up to the county board to make sure that they're clearing the process of provisional votes. So in some counties, when things have gone sideways, we've found out later that they had developed kind of a process where just everything would come in a stack, and there'd be a stack of the ones that were going to count, and there would be a stack of the ones that weren't going to count. And the only thing that the board was going on is staff saying, this is the one that's counting, this is the one that's not. This stack, that stack, right? And there was no questioning. There wasn't like, okay, for the ones that aren't counting, what was your process? Did you go through SEAMS? Did you look up each registration? Did you make sure that you did everything possible to check every record that we have? Because if you don't count somebody who is registered, even if it's only a partial count, then you disenfranchise them, right, on those other ballot items. And so it doesn't have to look like you going, you know, John and Paul and Mary and like which ones and for each of them. But definitely making sure that your staff isn't just making representations like count all these, discount all those. You want to at least get in there and just make sure that they've done their due diligence with all the resources that they have to make sure that they're making the right recommendations to you. Because ultimately it's on your vote that they're going to count or not count. And the state does do audits. Once your county board puts in a reason that something's not going to count, we get all of that data from the whole state, and we turn around. I mean, our IT people spend like all night, like all-nighters, multiple sometimes in a row, to do that for the entire state, to go through each provisional reason, make sure that we can back it up, because we don't want people to get disenfranchised. And each time we've done that, it's been like 1,000 votes statewide that we're able to save that would not have counted otherwise. But that still doesn't mean, just because there's that backstop, it doesn't mean that that's the best way to do it, because they could miss something, or the county might be better positioned to verify that person's name was just spelled wrong at one time. So make sure that you're on your staff. We'll try to do our best to follow up behind, just as a bonus plus on that, but it's still up to the county board. Provisional decisions, and there is another memo on this. I know we're getting up to like the 15-minute mark here. DMV provisional research is a big database that we use. Missing voter information in applications. Sometimes there's applications in other counties that we have to check, whether things didn't properly migrate. We do a lot, and the county board officials should be doing a lot in SEAMS to try to make sure provisionals count whenever they're supposed to count. So we have no reason to think that you won't, but just that's one thing that we always want the county boards to stay on their staff about, because that's a really important thing. Provisional voting is a real mode of voting, and people say that it's not. And that's real concerning, because you don't want people getting discouraged, getting up, not seeing their names on the poll book, and then leaving. You know, they can vote there. They may not get to vote for everything that they normally would be able to, but that person's probably not going to go to the right place. You don't want them to have waited through line and then not participated in the franchise. Canvas is the next piece of it, and you're going to get more details about this kind of stuff from Veronica on the technical side, but as kind of a statutory matter, and you'll get all these slides if you don't have them. I think you do, maybe not. We'll send it to you. But like at the top of these, you always have the statute citation. So if you're ever like, okay, well, what that slide was about, whatever, then you can go to the book and actually look at it. But Canvas in the statutes is defined as kind of the entire process of making sure that the votes were counted and tabulated correctly, culminating in the authentication of the official election results. Canvas is a duty. Canvas is a really important, all-encompassing responsibility, and it's not just a rubber stamp. These are the returns. I don't care that I heard that there was all these other problems that happened there. These are the returns. Your duty is to make sure that to the best of your ability, within the law as it's been written, you are ensuring the accuracy of the election in your county. So if you have heard that the tabulator was malfunctioning, and you're getting all these reports of people having issues with it, you're not just going to look at the tape and go, well, tape is the tape, done, right? You have a lot of power as the county board. You can say, well, let's rerun those ballots through another tabulator. You know, let's do it in an open and bipartisan way, but like we can make sure that these things are actually counted correctly. If we're hearing that there's a problem on this, let's rule that out, because at the end of the day, you all are the ones signing the piece of paper saying this is the election and it's accurate, not just this is what the machines told us. So you want to make sure that you're doing everything that you can. You have the authority under statutes to send for papers and persons. That's like a catch-all. It's like you can do a whole lot in your power to make sure, like, okay, somebody said that something wasn't happening, let's go fetch them. We have power under the statutes literally to say, we need to bring that person in front of us because we need to know exactly what they saw or didn't see. It's really on y'all to make sure that the security of the process of getting the ballots out there, getting the ballots back, making sure these are really the results. You have a lot of power to make sure that you can make that determination. You should use it. Canvas, and again, this is cited in a numbered memo. It's a board's responsibility. Board members sign a certification that these are the true and accurate results, and you're signing that. It's your reputation on the line. It's not a rubber stamp. And then after that process is done, reconciliation is the key. And I would say even before the process, actually, on your side, you're wanting to make sure that number of ballots out, number of ballots coming back matches, right? Even though you're gonna have one stack that's been voted, and the other stack that was just extra, you wanna make sure that there weren't ballots that were lost in transmission. Reconciliation is where we catch a lot of problems ahead of time. Even in really sophisticated, fancy counties, we will catch things. And you know, in Durham a couple years ago, 2 years ago, or 3 now, you know, reconciliation processes are how we caught that, you know, a person within the board office, one of the deputy directors, was literally running the same ballots multiple times because they were trying to cover up the fact that they could not reconcile. And so the results were wrong. The results were wrong. You know, we literally were able to catch some of that stuff literally going into the binary, like zeros and ones in the machine to see that that's what they were actually doing. But you all you can head off a lot of stuff and make sure that the staff is accountable and everybody else is accountable just by requiring a basic reconciliation where the numbers of ballots that went out, the same numbers that were coming back. And there's a couple other reconciliations that Veronica could fill you in on and that your staff probably was performing. And then finally on Canvas, all members have to be present at that meeting. And that's just under statute. Everybody has to be there. And if somebody can't be there, we always get this question if somebody's sick or somebody's traveling or whatever, calling in. You can have, you know, 3 of your members being here and a 4th calling in. If there's anything that they have to see and make a determination on, though, you're going to need some way like FaceTime or something. You know, if you're adjudicating a ballot where they like circle the name instead of bubbled it, you know, voter intent would say, well, you know, that's probably the one that they were doing because they circled that name. If you're having to look at something and lay eyes on it as part of your Canvas process, you want to do FaceTime. But otherwise, yeah, you can have a board member not be present physically here, but you do have to have all of them participating for Canvas. It has to be open meeting. It's noticed. We'll get into that real fast. And then again, reconciliation is key. Did y'all already did absentee with Ronnie?
Yeah.
Okay, you'll have these slides, but I'm gonna skip through just because of part of what we need to get through quickly. Because I know we've run up on your hour in just a second here. All right, sample audit count. After every single election event, the statutes require that the state board generate a random selection of precincts or the absentees or one stop and have those hand-eye counted, literally, because it's a check to make sure that the tabulator machines are actually counting the ballots correctly. And it's a way that we are able to help ensure confidence in the election, because if you could hack a machine or whatever and say, hey, every 5th time you see the bubble marked up here, count it like it's really marked down there, right? Tabulation machines are not perfect, and tabulation machines can be vulnerable. And the way that we ensure against that is by randomly selecting a precinct or 2, or an early voting site or 2, and having the county hand-eye counting